So here's what everybody's talking about. 37,000 people are currently registered for the January LSAT. Last year, we only had 26,000 registered, so we have nearly 50% more registrants. And so naturally, everyone online is going into panic mode saying competition's insane, scholarships are gone, law school is over. But I want you all to take a breath because a ton of those 37,000 people won't actually take the test. This happens every single year. Scores come back and they cancel. Life gets messy, they cancel. Their prep stalls, they cancel. So that big number of course matters, but it does not doom you. The surge is a signal, but it's not a death sentence. Approximately 20% of the people registered for the January LSAT will not actually have reportable scores if we look at historical trends. And so this means you need a clear plan going forward. Yes, there will be more people taking the LSAT and applying, but that just means small mistakes cost you a little bit more. But accuracy and pacing matter first and foremost. It does mean, though, that medians become even more sacred. If you are right at a school's LSAT median, you'll look great. If you're above median, even better. But if you're slightly below, schools, of course, have tons of alternatives. And the more people who are applying, the more scholarships get competitive. So strong scores matter more than ever. And if you can submit your application right after a score comes back, you will still be in the early application window. The January LSAT is not too late. The February LSAT also is not too late. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again because it's true and people need to hear it. You need to be reminded. The January LSAT is totally fine. Scores come back January 28th. February LSAT scores also totally fine for this cycle. They come back February 25th. If you can submit your application right when scores drop, you are in the early admissions window and in a crowded cycle. This is huge. There's no mystery, no secrets here, no chaos that you can't prepare for, just clearer stakes and clearer strategy. And so let's make this as simple as possible. How can you score higher on the LSAT while everybody else is melting down over the applicant surge? Logical reasoning, ID the conclusion, ID the evidence, ID the gap. That is the game. It has not changed. Every good move in logical reasoning, strengthen, weaken, assumption, flaw, it all becomes obvious when you know the gap in the argument. And please, for the love of God, stop trying to fight your way through every single question. Take the easy ones first, lock those down, skip the weird ones, come back to those later. And reading comprehension becomes 10 times easier when you stop trying to memorize everything. Just ask yourself, what job does this paragraph do? What role does it play? Is it setting up evidence? Is it providing conclusion? Is it critiquing something? Is it proposing a new idea? Once you answer those questions, the passage becomes a clear map. And the golden rule is, and this will never change, if you cannot point to the specific line or phrase that proves the answer, don't pick it. Now, of course, it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions. Drilling is not a strategy. Test day is not a drill. People rely on hope, but hope is not a pacing strategy. You've got to check your pace halfway through each section. Adjust it early, not at the end when you're already panicking. Now, we've got roughly 4 to 5 weeks or so till the LSAT in January. I know a lot of you out there are taking it. And by the way, if you are taking it in January, drop in the chat number 1 for January, number 2 for February, number 4 for April, number 6 for June. Let me know where you stand. But for those of you taking in January, first week 1, you got to figure out what is really going wrong. Take a full test under real conditions. Then ask yourself, what patterns show up in my mistakes? That right there is your study plan. There's no guesswork here. Then in week 2, you fix the patterns directly. Ask yourself, what are your weak areas? Are there particular logical reasoning question types that hurt you? Do you need to do some mapping and reading comprehension to clean up the confusion? Then, of course, engage in deep, slow review so your brain actually learns the logic. That second week is usually where people jump at least 5 to 7 points. Then in week 3, you build your stamina with back-to-back sections and a couple of full-length practice tests here or there. You also want to learn how to recover mentally when a section goes sideways. This is where you build that muscle of not crumbling under pressure. Then finally, week 4, that's your dress rehearsal time. You're doing your exact test day routine with the exact timing, the exact breaks, same breakfast, same start time. You want test day to feel boring because boring is calm, and calm is when you get your points. Now, I also want you thinking about retakes now, not because you'll definitely need a retake. Of course, I hope that you don't, but because planning reduces stress. If your score comes back close to your target, retaking is often the easiest win of your entire cycle. LSAC has removed one of the retake limits. Used to limit you to only 3 takes in one testing year. They have removed that limit. Now it's only 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. And so this means it's usually worth retaking. Because if you score at or below your target, it's worth another at bat to hope that you could do better. Through luck alone, you could score above your target, and that's your highest score on record. That's what law schools are considering. So if your score comes back and it's below your target, don't panic. Just fix the root issue before you retake it. Timing, logic, endurance, whatever it is, you can fix that. And giving yourself the comfort and the security of knowing that you can retake will make the whole process feel a lot less dramatic. And please don't wait to the last second to start your applications. This is the part almost everybody gets wrong. You can start now with your personal statement, your resumes, your optional essays, your school list, and your letter of recommendation requests. And that way, when your January score drops on the 28th, you can submit in minutes that same day, not weeks later. And when you are in a larger applicant pool like we're seeing this cycle, where numbers are up 50% over the past 2 years, when you apply earlier, you're in a better position. And of course, better to apply a bit later with a higher LSAT than earlier with a lower LSAT. But if you lock in your LSAT score in January, there is no reason that you shouldn't hit submit that very same day when scores come back on the 28th. Now, there are some tiny habits when it comes to LSAT prep that can give you a huge edge. They might look a bit small, but they're not. For every single argument, you want to be able to say, the argument assumes X. And you know that what that assumption is before you look at the choices. In reading comprehension, you can label the role of each paragraph in just a couple words. You skip confidently, meaning you're not wrestling every single question in that moment. You know that you can flag, you can skip, you can come back later. Every single question on the LSAT is worth the same. There are no bonus points for getting harder questions right, and you don't want to do harder at the expense of never even getting to the easier ones. So protect your emotional energy. If you find yourself getting stuck in that LSAT quicksand, just flag it, skip it, come back to it later. And I know it's hard to stay calm when you know that 37,000 people are taking the exact same test as you, but remember, people will freak out. People will post score predictions that are totally made up. People will spiral in the group chats. People will message you about how you too should be panicking, and you don't need any of that. And remember that probably 20% of those people signed up for it won't actually even take it. They will withdraw from that LSAT, they will postpone it, or they will take it and they will cancel it. And so your only competition is yourself from last week. You want to improve week over week, get your practice test scores higher and higher as we get closer to LSAT test day itself. And when we find that students get their goal scores, the biggest difference maker is not intensity, it is consistency. You don't have to be perfect, you've just got to keep showing up. And so for this week, my ask of you is for your super simple homework checklist, choose a backup LSAT test date. So for example, if you're aiming for January, choose February as your backup just for peace of mind. Block off 3 LSAT study sessions over the next week. Block off 3 specific times on your calendar where you're going to study for the LSAT for at least 30 minutes in one sitting. Keep a log of your weak logical reasoning question types like necessary assumption, inference, or flaw. Those are the highest yield areas. You want to do at least 2 reading comp passages per day. You want to drill 1 weak area in logical reasoning with deep review. You want to draft your personal statement introduction paragraph. Just free write it, stream of consciousness, jot something down. Don't edit in the moment. You can always come back to it later and revise. And think about your LSAT test day routine and practice it at least once. If you do even 3 of the things I just mentioned, that is more than enough progress for the next week. And remember, Don't stress, stay calm, stay focused. You're going to be fine. So how was that, guys? I feel like I'm back. I feel like I'm not sick anymore for the most part, at least. You might hear a little bit of sniffles here or there, but I'm largely on the upswing here. And so I'm here to help you out. Open Q&A, anything at all, LSAT, law school admissions. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat and I'll get to as many of those as I can. And I'll stay on for as long as I can. Got a question here from the Cookie Annihilator asking thoughts on reading logical reasoning question before reading the stimulus, meaning the argument, or does it not really matter? Okay, fantastic question. So back when I was personally studying for the LSAT, I liked reading the questions. I liked reading the argument first, meaning the stimulus first. But I've since switched my approach. I now like reading the question stem first because that way I know what to look for going into the argument. So I know, for example, if it's a flaw question, my job is going to be to identify the flaw. And I know that there is, of course, a flaw in the argument. In contrast, if it's a must be true question, it might be a fact set, in which case I'm not looking for gaps in the argument. Now, there are plenty of people who got top scores on both sides of this debate. And so I think that means it probably doesn't matter a whole lot and it's possible to get a top score going either way. So I'm not dogmatic about this. But since you've got at least a month until your LSAT, why not try it out both ways and see what feels better for you? And of course, see what gets you more questions correct in the time allotted. But for me, I like question stem first, and that's when I personally recommend at least trying it out to see how that feels and how it goes for you. Yeah, fantastic question. Thanks for that. So I'm scanning through the chat here, looking for some other questions here. Love Watermelon saying, I get level 1 and 2 questions correct, and I make mistakes on level 3, 4, and 5. How can I improve? So you're saying that you get easier questions right and you get harder questions wrong. Shocker, right? I mean, that's kind of to be expected, right? So what that means is that you're getting harder questions wrong because they're harder, and it's not necessarily specific to the LSAT question type, right? So a lot of folks will drill questions because it's easy to drill questions by type, but at a certain point, this typically comes when someone is in the 160, 165 or above range. They're not getting them wrong because they don't know strengthen versus weaken, for example. They're getting them wrong because of the method of reasoning in the argument, the complexity of the stimulus. And so this is where the review process comes into play, right? So I advocate an approach called the Socratic review method. It's a cornerstone of my LSAT courses and one-on-one coaching programs. And by the way, if you're looking for support on your LSAT prep journey, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. You can book a free one-on-one tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to help you all out. The way the Socratic review method works is this. We look at your thought process and your approach for every single question, regardless of the question type. We look at, for example, was your mistake stemming from the argument, the question stem, or the choices? Was it a tempting wrong answer? Was it an unappealing right answer? If we can get to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, we can help you avoid making the same mistake again. So what I'm recommending for you, Love Watermelon, is that when you are analyzing your mistakes, you look at your approach to see what is the root cause of why you're getting things wrong, because if it's only harder questions, then it may not be a fundamental error in your approach to a particular question type, but it may be that you need to dial down on what is your step-by-step approach for all of logical reasoning as a whole, for example. Does that help at all? My point here is that it's an issue of your process, not your fundamentals, potentially. If you do see trends with regard to a certain question type, then of course, yeah, sure, drill it. But if you're getting them right when they're easier and wrong when they're harder, then it may be about the complexity of the argument. Maybe, for example, are you properly identifying key indicator words for evidence and conclusion, or sufficient and necessary conditions? Is it formal logic? Is it conditional statements? Is it causal reasoning or correlation? Whatever the case may be, that may be what you want to drill down on. Seven's asking, could we expect an LSAT in both July and August? Probably not. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year. Used to be only 4 times a year, then they upped it to 8 times a year, but it's not every single month. And historically, over the past couple of years, they've been offering the LSAT 8 times per year, specifically in January, February, April, June, August, September, October, and November. So you have 4 consecutive takes in the fall, August, September, October, November, but there is no LSAT in July. Historically, of course, they could change it up. They will announce LSAT test dates probably in the spring, but we can expect both June and August, but not July and August. And so if you're the kind who is planning ahead, which I'm guessing you are if you're asking about an LSAT that's 7 or 8 months away, I would recommend maybe aiming for April as your first take and then June as your second take. And so a couple thoughts there. One is that April gives you 4 months. That's enough time if you're starting now. Then you've got June as your backup for a potential retake. And if you take it in June, you can then work on your applications over the summer and apply the second applications open in the fall. You could alternatively go for June as your first take and August as your second take, and then still apply the second applications open in the fall. Applications open in September typically. But the reason I'm saying April and June versus June and August is that we want to have a buffer in case you have a bad proctor or a tech issue or nerves and anxiety or you get sick. You can still retake it, yet still apply the second applications open anyway, despite something potentially happening. But August is totally fine. You're still applying the second applications open. And I want you to budget in for the possibility of a retake and the possibility of a bad proctor or tech issues because these things can happen. And I also recommend that everybody retake the LSAT at least once because through luck alone, you could score on the high end of your range or above your practice test average. And law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores, meaning there's no downside to retaking. So there's no reason not to retake. Everybody should because you could do on the high end or score above what you deserve. And if so, that's great. Why not get lucky and give yourself the chance to get lucky? I think everybody should go for that. Armani's asking, do I offer paid tutoring services? Why, yes, we do. And if you'd like to find out more, you can book a free tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. We like to customize every program for the individual student because everybody's got different goals, different time frame, different starting score. And so we look at where are you currently scoring? Have you even taken a practice test? What's your goal score? And what's your time frame? Because somebody taking it in 1 month and looking for a 10-point jump is going to have very different needs from somebody who's taking it in 6 months and looking for a 30-point jump. They're going to need radically different levels of support and have different timeframes related to those. And so I like to meet with every student personally before they join the program to make sure it's a good fit, and then to customize the program to meet their needs and their timeframe. And so if you want to talk through your situation, you can book that free call with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to help out anybody studying for the LSAT now or later. That's an open offer, by the way. Happy to talk through your situation and help you craft a plan of attack for your time frame to help you meet your goals. Just scanning through the chat here, apologies, got a lot of questions coming in. Going to try to get to as many of these as I possibly can. So Alicia is asking, how often should I take a practice test, whether timed or untimed, if I'm taking the April and or June LSAT? Yeah, so great question. Ali or Alicia, not sure. I see Ali Shades of Amber, awesome username there. So in my view, there's no such thing as taking an untimed practice test because if it's untimed, it's not really a practice test. If you're doing 100 questions in one sitting with no time constraint, I mean, that could take you all day. That could take you 2 or 3 days, depending on how long you spread it out. I mean, what does truly unlimited time mean, right? So people will say, if I had unlimited time, I would get a 180. And I'm like, really? Because then in that case, you'd be giving yourself several hours. You could take it over the course of 4 consecutive days, do a section a day. That would not be a really realistic depiction of where you stand, but of course it would let you know, is your issue accuracy or is it pacing? And in most cases, it's both. Before you take practice tests, I would recommend that we give you a solid overview of the fundamentals, the different sections, the different question types. Otherwise, a cold diagnostic is oftentimes discouraging, and it simply tells you what you already know, which is that You have not yet learned the language of the LSAT, but of course, you can with time. It can be useful, though, to serve as a benchmark of your later progress. You could say, okay, well, I took a cold diagnostic in early December and I hadn't studied at all, so it went terribly. But I'm going to use that as fuel and as motivation to say to myself, okay, well, I frankly suck at the LSAT, and that's okay because I haven't learned it yet. Like if I took a diagnostic in a foreign language that I hadn't studied, I would know nothing at all because it would just look like gibberish, right? And that's fine. But you've got 4 months till April, 6 months till June, and you can improve significantly from wherever your starting point is. So if you want, take a cold time practice test, see where you're at, use that as fuel and as motivation, and say to yourself, okay, well, I want a 180. I'm at a 120 or a 130 or whatever. I'm going to give it my all because I got a lot of work to do, and that's okay. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it for now. Build the fundamentals, get a solid overview of the different sections, the different question types, take a practice test. You can take one for free on LSAC's Law Hub platform. You log into there, make a free account. You'll be able to access a couple of practice tests for free. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, I've got some work to do. I'm going to hit the books, or I'm going to get a course or get some coaching. We can craft a customized plan for you, by the way, of course. And then we'll look at your time frame and say, okay, well, Allie's got 4 months till April, 6 months till June. She wants to improve 20, 30 points, whatever the case may be. Here's what it's going to take to go from here to there. Very doable. And then once you've built the fundamentals, just to answer your question directly, I would say you probably want to take a timed exam a week at least over the course of 2 to 3 months. Maybe you'll do 2 timed exams a week if you have the liberty to do nothing but study for the LSAT full time. I typically recommend taking at least 10 full-length timed exams before the big day, so that test day itself is like just another run-through and you've done it all before. But build the fundamentals first so that you're not burning through valuable limited practice material. So maybe take one practice test cold just to see where you're at, build the fundamentals, take a break from the full exams, then circle back and do a timed exam or 2 per week leading up to your test. Your first steps is asking, if you constantly leave 5-10 questions unanswered, is there a strategy you would recommend for skimming questions to ID the main ideas and ID the correct possible answer? Yeah, solid question. So if you're limited on time and you've got to engage in triage, is there a quick trick of sorts to make a strategic guess? So for inference family questions like must be true, most strongly supported, necessary assumption, you want to gravitate towards more moderate language because more moderate language is more likely to have been required by the stimulus than more extreme language would be. Same goes for reading comprehension. Like main point, main idea questions, they're rarely going to be extreme. So when in doubt, go for the more moderate wording. So rather than saying always or never, go for sometimes, maybe, possibly. Then in contrast, for question types that open the door to new information like strengthen, weaken, sufficient assumption, doesn't matter how strong the language is as long as it gets the job done. So in those cases, always, never, probably, extremely, all totally fine. That would be my general rule of thumb. When in doubt, again, inference, go for more moderate. Strength and weaken, go sufficient assumption, go for more extreme, or more extreme is okay at least. When in doubt, when you're totally at a loss and you're making an educated guess. Swimithy is asking, is it too late to study for the February LSAT? No, it's not too late. If you're starting cold, though, and you've only got 2 months, it's a little bit less than the optimal amount of time. I typically recommend giving yourself at least 3 or 4 months at minimum. So 2 is a bit on the light end of that. But if your schedule is pretty open, if you're not working full time, if you're not in school full time, if you can make the most of the holiday season to give it your all and study hard, it might be enough, but it also depends. I mean, what's your current score? Have you taken a practice test even? And then What's your goal score? If you want to improve 50 points or 40 points and you're working full time, not going to be that easy. If you're studying the LSAT full time and you're looking for only 10, 20 points, then it could be doable. And try to get some support if you're waging an uphill battle. It's hard to go it alone. So reach out for help. Like I said, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there. Link in my bio, link in the description. Happy to help you out and talk through your situation. Boy Wonder's asking, can having 2 Fs on your transcript mess up your chances of getting into law school? Yeah, it could. I mean, it's not optimal, right? We'd prefer that you not have the Fs, and it's going to raise some questions. I mean, why did you get the Fs? What caused you to have Fs on your transcript? I mean, was it academic dishonesty like plagiarism? If so, that's a major red flag, and you definitely want to write an addendum about that. In contrast, if you had a personal matter that led you to neglect academics because of a personal family situation, then that's going to look better to law schools, relatively speaking, than plagiarism. But whatever the reason is, you certainly want to talk about that in your application so that you're not leaving any questions unanswered. But feel free to follow up with me and talk through your situation more if you'd like. Car's asking, how many hours should I study for the LSAT if I'm taking classes 3 hours twice a week? Okay, so is that like you're in school part-time right now? I mean, 3 hours twice a week, that's only 6 hours of class. That's not a ton. It's like you're in school part-time if that's the extent of it, right? So I would say give yourself a lot more than that to study for the LSAT. Oh, so you're doing LSAT classes 3 hours twice a week. Okay, so you're doing some kind of 3-hour LSAT class twice a week. I mean, I don't love long LSAT classes because they tend to get kind of boring, to be frank. I try to keep my classes just 1 hour or so because people get attention spans, get fatigued, especially after a long day of work. So I would say don't treat your class time like it's studying. Treat it like a lecture where you might be missing a bit of it because by hour 3, especially if it's in the evening, it's not optimal. In my programs, we do 1-hour classes 4 times a week for small groups. Then we have separate one-on-one coaching because one-on-one coaching gives you more attentiveness because you're in live conversation with somebody. And so it's harder to fall asleep or tune things out. So treat it like a lecture, which it probably is, but then study for the LSAT probably 1 or 2 hours a day consistently, 5-6 days a week on top of that. And then as for specifics, depends on your goals, depends on your time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in 2 months, you probably want to put in 15-20 hours a week. If you're taking it in 6 months, maybe 5-10 hours a week is enough, but it also depends on what your goals are. Again, everyone's situation is different, and these are the kind of factors I think about when making recommendations. And so I can't give you only one answer on this. The other thing I'll say is think about it like you're an Olympic athlete training. Michael Phelps wouldn't ask, how much should I swim? He would give it his all, right? He'd wake up early in the morning, put in a couple hours before everyone else has even woken up because you want to give it your all to achieve extraordinary results. I mean, people will say that they want a 175, which is top 1%, and then say, how much should I do? And that's the wrong question. The people who get 175 are not asking how much should they do. They're asking, how can I do more? And am I doing the right things? So maximize what you can put in, make this your number one priority if you can, and design everything else around this. Block off the time in your schedule or it doesn't exist. Nizil is asking, what specific range of LSAT practice tests should I be doing in prep for the real LSAT? So there are 59 numbered exams in the new LSAT format. They're numbered 101 to 159 in LSAC's Law Hub platform. I would only do real LSAT questions. Don't do LSAT for dummies. For the love of God, give that book to your worst enemy because it's a waste of time. It's got fake questions that have mistakes in them. Stick with the real deal. And then if you're taking the LSAT like most folks are in the next 2 to 3 months, I would probably want you doing the most recent 20 exams. You don't want to do the older exams and then never get to the newer ones as a result. So focus on the newer ones specifically and then work backwards. And so let's say you're taking the LSAT in February, 2 months from now, that means the week prior, you'll want to do exam number 159. 3 or 7 days prior to that, you'll do exam 158. 10 days prior to the exam, you'll do exam 157 and work backwards and say to yourself, okay, well, that means I'll be able to start with exam 139 and get to 159 by test day. And if you never get to exam 101, that's okay. But don't start at exam 101 and never get to the newest because more recent is more relevant. But make a schedule, block it off, and just work backwards from test day to figure out how you can budget those exams. And again, of course, we actually help students with their study plans in our LSAT coaching programs. And so if you want to book that free call with me through the link in my bio, I'm happy to talk through your situation and help you design your plan of attack. Leslie asks, if I start studying right now, what do you think is the best time to take the LSAT? So if you start right now, like today, I would say all else being equal, probably April, because that gives you 4 months, and 2 months from scratch studying is not an ideal amount of time. More time is better. The one thing people always say to me is, I wish I had started earlier. And so start early, start now, start earlier than you think you need to. Give yourself the most time that you can to achieve your fullest potential. The more time you put in, the more that you can improve. But if you want to apply this cycle specifically that we're in the middle of right now, February is not too late, but it is probably the latest I would recommend for this cycle. If you're not able to take the LSAT until April or June, I would then apply in the fall, meaning that I would apply approximately 9 months from now to start law school a year after that. Relatedly, Just Dylan asks, how far ahead should you study for the LSAT? Again, I recommend at least 3 to 4 months ideally. And how much to schedule a consultation with you guys? It's free. I don't charge anything to meet with me. For a free tutoring lesson, a free consult, you can book that call with me through the link in my bio, and I'm happy to talk through your situation with you and help you figure out when you should take the LSAT and when to craft your plan of attack. SGA Free Throw Bait is asking, how often do I go live? Glad you mentioned that. I forgot to mention, I go live every single day. So every single weekday, same time as right now, same place as right now. So that's 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, on YouTube, TikTok, or wherever else you happen to be watching this. Every single day, please spread the word if you can. The only way that this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these, and the algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't put ads on them. And so I really rely on your spreading the word on your socials, sharing the link. Really helps. Really do appreciate it, and it helps things out. The more that this grows, the more I'll do it and expand it over time. Yeah, happy to answer any questions at all, anything LSAT in law school admissions. Question here from Leslie asking, what if I've been out of school for 4 years and have been a paralegal since then? That's great. I mean, law schools love it when you have legal work experience, and being a paralegal, of course, is directly relevant to law school. And also, the cool thing about not applying direct from undergrad is that law schools discount your GPA. That could be good or bad depending on what your GPA is like. And so if your GPA is low, if you've been out of school for a while, then they're going to discount your GPA, which is good for you, and they will discount it in favor of your LSAT score, your application essays, and your work experience. And so for someone who's been out of school for 10, 20 years, who had a low GPA, totally fine. They will say, okay, well, who you were at 20 is not who you are at 30 or 40. And so they will focus more on your LSAT and your work experience and your essays instead. So your GPA is not your destiny. They know that you have matured and grown since then, and the more time that has passed. And so don't stress on your GPA. It is what it is. Just focus more on your LSAT and getting the highest score possible to counterbalance it. Anne's asking, is it possible to go from 153 to 160? Absolutely. 7 points is very doable. And it's a lot easier to go from a 153 to a 160 than from a 173 to a 180, right? So look at your analytics, look at your practice tests, look at your weak areas, and then design a plan to specifically address and target those. And in 1 month between now and January is very doable. We actually have a January LSAT bootcamp specifically designed to help you get the highest possible increase in just 1 month. And so reach out to me if you want to talk through that option. Tamara is asking, what's the average cap for points you can gain across your studying? There really is no cap. I mean, it's a matter of what you put in terms of the time per day, per week, and the number of weeks that you devote to this, right? So if you're asking, can I improve 50 points in 1 day? Probably not. Can you improve 30 points in a couple months? Absolutely. You just want to look into what have you neglected and then devote energy specifically in those areas. But the thing that you are avoiding may be the exact thing that you need to focus on. And so if you hate reading comp, don't neglect reading comp, because let's say if your logical reasoning, you're at, say, 21 out of 26 in accuracy, but in reading comp, you're at 13 out of 26 or 28. The 13 out of 28, there's a lot more room for improvement there. There's a lot more low-hanging fruit in the reading comp area, most likely. At the same time, though, because logical reasoning is 2/3 of the scored portions of the exam, any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the two sections. So don't sleep on the logical reasoning either. Also a really important area to focus on. Everything's important. One thing I will say, though, is that not everything is equally important, right? So in logical reasoning, the most common question types are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. And I mention this to say that you don't want to work on parallel reasoning or evaluate the argument, which are less common question types, at the expense of the more common types. Always focus on the highest yield areas first, master those, then and only then switch gears to the less common types like parallel. Everybody hates parallel and it gets a lot of attention, but there's only a couple per section. So focus on the low-hanging fruit that's going to have the highest impact to start with. And people will neglect reading comp because they'll say, well, I did well on reading comp on the SAT, so I don't need to focus on it here. But the thing is that reading comprehension is a whole third of the test. And some of those types of questions are actually pretty easy, like main idea, primary purpose, tone, title, author's attitude, author's opinion. And so just read the passage, ID the main point. You could knock out a couple questions right off the bat. And people will say, what should I read for reading comp? Should I read The Economist? Should I read Scientific American? But there's hundreds, literally hundreds, like 400 official LSAT reading comp passages to study from. And you're probably not going to get to all of them. And so you could print out some of the really old ones and read them on the toilet, on the plane, when you're traveling for the holidays if you want. Read them to help you fall asleep at night. And just read through those and organically absorb the boring language and test yourself on your ability to interpret that language. Dumb it down. See how could you explain it to a 5-year-old. And that's going to go a long way to helping you get better at navigating these, because there are a limited set of LSAT reading comp skeletons, I'll call them for lack of a better word. And these skeletons, these structures, are predictable. The more that you see these structures and skeletons in different contexts with different window dressing, different surface level topics, the more that you will be able to recognize them in new settings with different topics on the surface. So the best way to get better at reading comp is by doing more of it, but stick with the official LSAT materials. Use the older reading comp passages for passively reading them outside of a timed setting, and then use the newer ones for timed work with individual sections or full-length exams. Reeves is asking, am I doing any more logical reasoning drills? Yeah, great question, Reeves. So I'm taking a break from the drills for now because they were getting kind of repetitive, to be frank, and I felt like I wanted to give you guys more variety, and I'm seeing lots of great questions coming in every single day on these lives recently, and so I figured that since you all have got real questions that I think are worth talking about, I'm just going to focus on helping real people with real problems on the questions that they're raising right now. And so for as long as the questions keep coming in, I'm just going to keep answering them. Maybe I'll bring them back in the future if enough folks want me to. But for now, I think that the questions are going pretty well, so I'm going to stick with that for now. But thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a point to bring them back in the future, but for now, I'll stick with the questions. Tamer's asking, would I recommend that you familiarize yourself with logical reasoning by doing 15 minutes a day, like a year before the test? Yeah, totally. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I wish that more people started studying for the LSAT earlier. And so if you wanted to take a slow and steady approach, yeah, 15 minutes a day, slow and steady, I think that's a great idea. And you've got enough exams available to you that you can afford to spend some of the older exam questions on just that sort of light familiarization. and then save the newer ones, though, for your timed work. On the LSAC website, the Law Hub Advantage platform, you have your 59 numbered exams, 101 to 159, but then you also have an additional practice section in Law Hub and drills in Law Hub as well. And so I would recommend you use the additional practice section and drills for your light pre-LSAT or pre-serious studying to start with, and then save the full exams for your studying later down the line. Miss Raquel Rage is asking, is there a good podcast that I would recommend? Yeah, mine. So I actually have my own LSAT podcast. It's called LSAT Unplugged, and you could find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen to podcasts. It's just LSAT Unplugged. And I also have someone was asking about YouTube. So I actually have a YouTube channel of the same name, LSAT Unplugged. And so if you go to my bio on TikTok, you might be able to access it directly from there, or just search LSAT Unplugged on your podcast app or YouTube and it'll come up. I got tons of material on there. Tamer's asking the best place to get the LSAT questions. Yeah, so LSAC, you'll find nearly every single LSAT question on there. That's the best source of the questions. Don't get the books on Amazon because they are outdated. The LSAT's online now, so take the LSAT online as well. And so just go on Amazon. No, don't go on Amazon. Just use the Law Hub Advantage platform specifically. Steven's saying, I used your videos on YouTube and increased my score. Cool TikToks. Awesome. Really glad that it's helping. Steven, keep at it. Tamer's asking, I want to take it in June. How should I go about studying? So June, you've got 6 months, plenty of time. I divide LSAT prep into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is building the foundation, drilling questions by type. Pacing is individual sections, working on how you allocate your time management, and then endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. So if you've got 6 months, you could say devote 2 months to foundation with accuracy, 2 months to drilling questions by type and doing individual sections, and then 2 months for endurance, full-length timed practice tests. So slow build up little by little. Again, you want to do at least 10 full exams before test day so that it's like just another run through. Strawberry's asking, can I improve roughly 7-8 points from 157 to 164 by January? Absolutely. Very doable. It's a pretty moderate, reasonable increase. The question is, what's your plan to get there and how, right? So is there a weak area that you want to focus on? Is there a particular question type that you want to focus on? Do you know what you need to be working on specifically? Is there anything you've been neglecting that you should switch gears to and focus on? And so if you want to talk through your situation, you can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to help you out and talk through your situation. Armani, with regard to pricing and custom packages, we always like to talk through that to make sure it's a good fit for your situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. We offer more personalized programs. Shiz is asking, do approval of accommodations hinder my applications? No, I wouldn't think so. Are you asking about like LSAT accommodations for extra time or extra breaks? I mean, you can submit a request for accommodations on lsac.org. And as long as you do it prior to the deadline, it shouldn't pose any delay for you of any sort. Just make sure that you submit by the deadline, because law schools are pretty strict about, LSAC is pretty strict about the deadlines. They're not going to extend them for you for whatever reason. And it will not look bad on your applications because law schools will not even know that you got accommodations. Due to a lawsuit with the Americans under the Americans with Disabilities Act with the federal government, there is no asterisk on your score report for having accommodations, meaning that nobody will know but you that you got accommodations. And so law schools will not know, LSAC will not know. It will not hurt you in any way. Strawberry saying, I see my biggest drop in reading comp as I've spent 90% of my studying around logical reasoning. So reading comp is suffering. You spent 90% of your time on logical reasoning, meaning you've only spent 10% of your time on reading comprehension. So I've got a crazy idea for you, Strawberry. What if you spend a bit more time on reading comprehension. Then you might see more improvement there because you wouldn't be neglecting it any longer. And so this kind of circles back to what I was saying earlier, right? Which is that we often avoid what we need to work on because we don't like it, because we know that we're not good at it. But if you want to improve in your weak areas, which are usually the lowest hanging fruit, we've just got to devote a bit more time there. And so a lot of what I do in the coaching is basically pointing out the obvious, because from a third person's perspective, it's often more obvious than to you directly when you're in it and you have tunnel vision. And so we craft study plans for students where we say, okay, well, you're performing poorly in this area. There's a lot of potential here. Why don't we just give you some accountability and structure to put more time into that specific area? We give you a structure where it would be impossible for you to fail because you have some accountability, somebody pointing you back at the particular areas that you need to work on. And then we answer your questions and guide you to help you to point out your blind spots and help you find a better course of action. And so my recommendation for you is devote more time to reading comprehension. If you do that, you would be surprised at how quickly you will improve, and that's probably the lowest hanging fruit for you in your situation. So Tamer's asking, for a year, how would you break up a study plan? So I'll give you then the extended version of how I design study plans, which is a 5-phase approach called the LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. And it is a cornerstone of how we design study plans for our students inside the LSAT Unplugged program. Learning is the first phase, building the foundation, getting a solid overview of the different sections and different question types. A is for accuracy, drilling by type, to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. S is for sections, doing individual timed 35-minute sections to work on your pacing. E is for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. And R is for review, which is spread throughout. And so over the course of a year, maybe you spend 3 months on learning, building the foundation, 3 months on A for accuracy, drilling questions by type, then another 3 months on individual sections, working on pacing, another 3 on exams and endurance, and R for review is throughout the entire thing. Now, I'm not really saying to spend the first 9 months doing everything except full exams. Exams should be introduced earlier, of course, but as a major theme or emphasis, that is broadly speaking how I would break it up over the course of a year. And I'm assuming here, of course, that you're not studying for the LSAT full-time, doing nothing else for an entire year. If you have the free time and liberty to do that, that's amazing. Most people are, of course, not in that situation. Most people are probably working or in school, have family obligations. But if you wanted to take a slow and steady approach, studying for the LSAT maybe 5-10 hours a week at the start and ramping it up as test day gets closer, that might be one way to go about it. If you had a year, though, I would probably want you to take at least 20 to 30 full-length timed exams. Taking 10 timed exams is more of a minimum. More, of course, is better if you can. And because there are 59 numbered exams and a handful more that are unnumbered, that there's plenty of material for you to study from. Becktopia is asking, what do you think about evening law school after an MBA at a top 20 law school? I think that's cool. I mean, if it fits your situation, if you want to go to law school in the evenings only, meaning part-time, because I'm guessing that you're working full-time, then that's a totally fine move. I mean, I guess the question is why? Like, are you working full-time and is that why you can't go full-time to law school? Then sure. I mean, part-time law school is tough though, I'll say, because in that case, you're balancing full-time work with part-time law school. And if you also might have family obligations in addition, that's a lot to take on. But part-time law school is meant to be a slower route to getting the JD, where you're getting it not in 3 years, but maybe more like 4 years. And so if that's how you're going to make it happen, then all the power to you. Go for it. Why not? Bint is saying, I score better when I drill, but when I time my test, I never score over 13 in logical reasoning, meaning that you're never getting more than half of them correct in logical reasoning. That makes sense because drilling is individual bite-sized questions. Timing introduces a whole new factor. And so I always say it's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing, time management, and endurance, because test day is not a drill. And so I'm going to encourage you, Bint, stop drilling questions, stop doing them bite-sized, a question here, a question there. Do more timed sections, do more full-length exams, because that's what test day is actually going to be like, and you got to get ready for it. So set aside 35 minutes for a full section, set aside 2 to 2.5 hours for a full exam, and take the test in that context. The only way to get better at timing is to actually time yourself and to get that internal pacing and rhythm down. So do more of it. In logical reasoning, I typically recommend as a pacing benchmark, aim to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10, 12 minutes, build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. But that means you're going faster on the easier questions so that you have more time for the tougher questions later that truly need it. When are you taking the test, by the way? Even if you're only taking it in January, you still got enough time to focus on this exclusively, but no more drilling. If you've got 2 months till February or 4 months till April, then of course you can sleep on it a little bit longer, but you said you're taking January. Okay, so in that case, yeah, definitely more exams sooner rather than later. At minimum, I'd recommend 1 a week, ideally twice a week if you can, just because there's not a ton of time, and we want to get more timed exams under your belt so that you can get that internal pacing and rhythm down. Just scanning through the chat here for more questions that are coming in. Latina Primus saying, get LSAT accommodations if possible. Turns out I wasn't dumb, just slow AF. Okay, yeah. So a lot of folks don't realize this, but the Law School Admission Council has gotten more liberal about granting accommodations for extra time and extra breaks after a series of lawsuits. They used to be too strict and denied them to those who were deserving them. Now, if anything, they've swung the other way and are a lot more liberal in giving away extra time accommodations. And so if you think you might qualify, it's worth seeking them out. All you need is a note from a qualified professional like a doctor or a psychiatrist with a recommendation for what accommodations you should get and why. You could get them for ADHD, for testing anxiety, for migraines. And so if you think you might qualify, certainly I recommend seeking them out, but do respect LSAC's deadlines for accommodations because they are strict about those deadlines. All Shades of Amber is asking, if I'm taking the June LSAT, what should my timeline be for applying to law school for the fall of 2027? So if you want to start law school in fall of 2027, taking the June LSAT is totally fine because you take it in June, you apply in, say, September of June, you take it in June 2026, you apply in September of 2026, and then you start law school 1 year later. And so you're right on track. I think, if anything, you're ahead of schedule, which is awesome. Yes, you can take it in June and apply that fall and then start law school 1 year later. So I think you're in the right place for that. I think your timing frame is good. Kenya's asking, I'm a sophomore now. Should I start studying for the LSAT in the summer before junior year? Yeah, if you think you want to go to law school and you're planning ahead, that's totally fine. LSAT scores are good for 5 years. And so you could take it in the summer before junior year and then apply to law school 1 year later if you wanted to go directly from undergrad to law school, and your score will still be good. You're planning ahead. I think that's great, and that's a good plan. It's a good plan. I wish more people took that early approach and gave it the time that they needed. And so if you've got a pretty open schedule over the summer and you can give it your all over the summer, you could study for the LSAT, say, in May, June, July. You take it in August or September. Solid 3 months of hopefully full-time or at least part-time studying. I think you're in a pretty good position to maximize your score. Chesco Bar is saying, I'm 38. Is that too late for law school? Absolutely not. I've helped people in their 50s and 60s, even their 70s, study for the LSAT, people pursuing it as a second career. No reason you can't go to law school. Even in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, does not matter. You can succeed. Law schools love older so-called non-traditional applicants because you have more real-world life experience. You're not going to law school on a whim, and you have more, I'll say, persistence and stick-to-itiveness than some younger folks might have. Of course, anybody can succeed in law school, but law schools do like older applicants because they bring more real-world experience and sometimes more real-world exposure to the world of law and the professional world to bear and give us some context and stories and life experiences in the classroom. So just talk about your work experience in your applications, share your reasons for wanting to go to law school. But if anything, I think that older applicants may have actually more of an edge than some other folks for those reasons. Ashley Dion's asking, what's your best strategy getting better at sufficient assumption versus necessary assumption questions? And so those are two very different question types with different approaches. I have some in-depth YouTube videos on this I'd recommend looking at, but in the meantime, I'll say that the first step is to know how to tell them apart. And so you distinguish between the two types based on the keyword or key phrase in the question stem. Necessary assumption questions have keywords and phrases in the question stem synonymous with necessity, like depends upon, requires, and assumes. In contrast, sufficient assumption questions have keywords and phrases in the question stem synonymous with sufficiency, like allows, enables, properly inferred if assumed, and logically follows if assumed. And so you've got to be able to tell the difference between the two types before you can approach them, because each one requires a very different approach. For necessary assumption questions, you're looking for an assumption required in order for the argument to work. Meaning, if that thing were not the case, the conclusion would not logically follow from the evidence and the argument falls apart. In contrast, for sufficient assumption questions, you're looking for new information that, if true, would guarantee the argument 100%, leaving no ambiguity at all. And so for these reasons, for necessary assumption questions, you want to gravitate towards more moderate language, because more moderate language is more likely to have been required by the stimulus than more extreme language would be. In contrast, for sufficient assumption questions, it does not matter how strong the language is, as long as it gets the job done of guaranteeing the conclusion itself. And so that's how I would tell the difference in the different approaches for each one. Again, on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel, I go in depth on this very topic. Since you asked, the YouTube channel is LSAT Unplugged. You can access it through the link in my bio. I suspect you can. I'm happy to help you out. I have tons of material on everything LSAT and law school admissions, and all the recordings of all these lives are on the YouTube channel as well, under the live tab. If you find these lives helpful, I do these every single day, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these, and the algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so please spread the word. The more this grows, the more I will expand it over time. If you'd like my help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok as well. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. I'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.